I was a man in my early 30s, standing in the middle of nowhere, serving drinks to my boss at a company party, giving my best to keep him in a good mood. As I approach my 32nd birthday, I can't help but notice how my friends and coworkers are getting married one by one, while romance remains absent from my life. I know that simply waiting around won't bring about any romantic encounters, but there's someone I can't forget, which is probably why I'm not actively seeking a partner. After my boss finally wrapped up his lengthy monologue, I excused myself to the restroom. I thought I might step outside for some fresh air, just to clear my head. As I wandered down the hallway of the bar, I unexpectedly bumped into her, the one person I've never been able to forget. My high school sweetheart. She had a more mature aura now, but there was no mistaking it. It was Susan. She noticed me too, and stopped in the middle of the hallway. "Jack," she called out my name, then fell silent. "It's been a while. I'm here having drinks with my boss." We hadn't spoken in over a decade since our falling out, so I wasn't sure how to interact with her. I'm here for dinner with friends," she replied. Despite this unexpected reunion, that was all the conversation we managed. We parted ways with a simple, "well then." Susan and I had dated since high school, and our relationship continued even as we attended different colleges. But we broke up after a fight during our job hunting phase. I was the one to blame. Susan, a brilliant and beautiful woman, was attending a prestigious university and secured a job relatively early. However, I was the opposite. I attended a mediocre college and struggled to find a job during my senior year. I grew frustrated as I continued to face rejection after rejection. It would have been bearable if that was all, but I became jealous of Susan. Despite her attempts to support me and consider my feelings, I felt pitiful, as though I was being pitied. I lashed out at her with harsh words. "You wouldn't understand how I feel. You're probably looking down on me. Stop acting like a goody two-shoes, making a fool out of me." I even said things far worse. It was only natural that she eventually got fed up with me. After our breakup, I managed to secure a job at my current company, but Susan and I never communicated again. In my 20s, I learned from a high school classmate that Susan had married and moved to Chicago due to her husband's job transfer. I felt a mix of regret and relief. Regret for what I'd lost, but relief that she was happy. After hearing about her marriage, I tried to move on, going on a few blind dates, but I never found anyone who truly felt right. And that brings us to now. About a week after running into Susan at the bar, I was visiting my favorite cafe after work. I enjoyed buying coffee beans from this place and brewing coffee at home on my days off, a love for coffee that I developed back in college. I had become particular about selecting beans and how I ground them. As I entered the cafe, eager for a new batch of beans, there she was again, Susan, enjoying a cake set. This was our second encounter. "We meet again," I murmured, surprised by the unexpected coincidence. "Really? Are you alone?" I briefly explained that I often came here to buy coffee beans. "What about you? Are you alone? Isn't your husband waiting at home? I didn't even know you were back from Chicago." At my words, Susan lowered her eyes and opened her mouth, putting on a forced smile. "My husband passed away 4 years ago. I've been living in Chicago since then, but I only recently moved back here." "I see. I'm sorry, that was thoughtless of me," I said, realizing how out of touch I was. I had no idea her husband had passed away. I had thought she was still building a happy home. After that, our conversation didn't continue, and we said our goodbyes and parted once again. Susan, who lost her husband and now lives alone in San Francisco. I want to talk to her more, to get closer to her, but I don't feel like I have the right, not after the way I hurt her with my harsh words at the end of our relationship. About a month later, on a night of a terrible typhoon, I had my third encounter with my widow ex-girlfriend, Susan. My apartment was beyond the station. On my way home from work, I passed by the station, which was crowded with people. The trains were stopped or delayed, and the rain was pouring down in sheets. In the midst of all the chaos, I spotted Susan taking shelter from the rain while on the phone. She noticed me immediately and called out, "Amazing, we meet again." "Yeah, is the train stopped?" I asked. She nodded with a bitter smile. "It's stopped. I don't know when it'll start moving again, but both the buses and taxis are packed. I just tried calling a nearby hotel, but there's no availability. Even without a typhoon, the station is always busy, so I guess it's inevitable." As I glanced at Susan, I noticed her clothes and hair were soaked. Even though it was early spring, the nights were still chilly. I handed her a handkerchief. Use this, you must be cold. Oh, thank you, she replied, taking the handkerchief. I had an umbrella, but the rain and wind were so strong. When I found Susan, the rain and wind had just begun to ease, but before that, it had been a stormy mess. The sky looked like it might start pouring again at any moment. I couldn't just leave Susan stranded with no way to get home or find a hotel to stay in. Do you want to come to my place? The words slipped out of my mouth naturally, but I regretted them immediately. Why would she want to come to the home of her ex-boyfriend, with whom she had a messy past? But her response surprised me. You're willing to let me stay? Susan asked, looking up at me with moist eyes. I felt a pang of nervousness. Those eyes, more mature now, seemed to be asking for help. Sure, come on, I said, trying to hide my surprise. Susan smiled softly, relieved. And so Susan came to stay at my apartment. When we arrived, I handed Susan a towel and offered her a bath, knowing she must be cold from being drenched. Seeing her emerge from the bathroom with her hair still damp and wearing my clothes as pajamas made my heart race. But I tried to push those thoughts aside. My intentions in inviting her were innocent. After drying her hair, Susan said, I'd like some coffee. Could you brew it for me? I've been missing it for a while. There was a bag of coffee beans and a grinder on the counter where she was looking. I used to make coffee for her often when we were in college and dating. Sure, I replied, grinding the beans carefully just for her. She watched me so intently that I asked, Do you want to try grinding the beans? At first, Susan nodded, but then she hesitated. Actually, I'll pass. I want you to do it, Jack. I've missed your coffee, she said. Even if her words were just courtesy, they made me happy. As the coffee was almost ready, I asked her how she wanted it. Do you want it as a café au lait? Yes, you remember that, she said, surprised. Susan couldn't drink black coffee when we were dating, so I always made it into a café au lait by adding milk for her. Of course I remember, I said, offering her the freshly made café au lait. Susan took the mug from me with both hands and carefully brought it to her lips. Ah, it's delicious. The aroma is soothing. I've missed this. I've missed your café au lait. After we broke up, I've been wanting to drink it for over 10 years. I've been holding back for more than 10 years. Her words, more than 10 years, carried a significant weight. I poured myself a cup too. Like in my college days, I still preferred black coffee. Drinking my own brew is part of my daily routine. But today's coffee, shared with Susan, tasted even better than usual. After finishing our coffee, we discussed where we would sleep. Jokingly, I said, I'd only have one bed. Is it okay if we sleep together? I wanted to lighten the mood and make Susan, who seemed to feel guilty for staying over, at least smile. I expected her to retort with something like, No, it's not okay. But her reply stunned me. Okay, she said, looking at me with a serious expression. I've been lonely since my husband passed away, she admitted. I couldn't help but feel an urge to hug Susan. But I knew this didn't mean she had feelings for me. Susan had been spending lonely nights since her husband's death, and tonight, perhaps due to the stormy weather, her loneliness had just overflowed. I realized that if she spent the night in the same bed with me, she might regret it later, and not just her. I might regret letting the mood carry me away, even though I still cared deeply for her. Susan, I'm sorry for the inappropriate joke. You can sleep on the bed. I'll take the couch in the living room. I don't want you to regret anything because of your current feelings, I said. Susan seemed to anticipate what I was going to say and nodded without arguing. No, you're right. I'm sorry, she replied. Her agreement relieved me. Even though I decided not to let the situation get out of hand, I felt this might be the last time I'd see Susan. I knew I needed to apologize for something I'd wanted to for a long time. Susan, I'm sorry about what happened when we broke up. When we broke up? Do you mean that argument we had? She asked. I found myself rethinking whether I could even call what happened an argument. From the moment we started dating until we broke up, I never found a single fault in Susan. Back in high school, I once asked her why she would even consider dating a guy like me. Just like now, I was a pretty ordinary guy, mediocre in academics and sports. In contrast, Susan was adored by everyone, an honor student, popular with teachers, and highly academic. I just couldn't see what balanced out between us. But as it turns out, Susan and I did not meet for the first time in high school. Apparently, we were in the same class in kindergarten. a fact I had forgotten. I'm told I protected Susan back then when she was being bullied. From that point on, I was considered a hero in Susan's eyes. Susan moved away when we were in senior kindergarten, but she told me she never forgot about me. I had no recollection of doing anything so admirable. I vaguely remember helping a girl back then, but I feel like I was just trying to show off as a little kindergartner. Susan recounted the story of our kindergarten days several times after we started dating. I used to find it cute that she remembered such things. But by the time I was job hunting, I was sick of hearing it. It just wasn't possible for a guy like me, who couldn't even secure a job, to be a hero. That was when I had just been rejected by the 10th company. I was feeling the bitter truth of how much your alma mater matters in job hunting, with no job offers coming my way. I felt like I was being denied as a person, while Susan, who had already secured a job, was trying to encourage me. At that time, I was so immature that I found Susan's kindness irritating. I snapped at her. "Shut up, Susan. Everything is perfect for you. You've always been a top student, got into a great college, found a job right away. You have no idea what it feels like to be a failure like me." Susan's eyes welled up with tears. "Don't talk like that about yourself, Jack. You're my hero," she said softly, but her words only fueled my frustration. I was overwhelmed by the stress of job hunting, and when she brought up that story again, I lost it. "I'm tired of hearing that story. I don't know it. I can't remember anything from kindergarten. Stop imposing your ideals on me. I'm not your hero. I don't want to hear your pointless stories anymore. You're annoying me," I lashed out. The look on Susan's face in that moment is something I still can't forget. It was pure hurt. I told her to leave, and she walked away, her shoulders drooping. After that, I ignored Susan, who kept trying to apologize. I just wanted her to leave me alone. Then, one day, she called me and said, "Let's break up." It was only natural after the awful things I'd said. All I managed to say in response was, "I understand." As I was reminiscing, Susan's voice brought me back to reality. She was laughing at my decade-late apology. "No, it's okay. It's not all your fault, you know. Looking back, I think I should have given you more space. I was young, and I thought I had to be there for you, that I had to say something to encourage you. But maybe that just put more pressure on you and made you more frustrated. Maybe we were just too young, both of us." I was touched by Susan's kindness, even though I was the one to blame. But you know, when we met again in high school after all those years apart, I really thought it was destiny. But I guess it wasn't. We really can't be together, can we? I had no response to that. That night, we slept in separate rooms. When I woke up the next morning, Susan was gone. The apartment felt cold, as if the temperature had dropped. That's when I noticed a note from Susan on the table. Asterisk, "If we meet again, I hope we can be together next time, asterisk." Seeing those words, I bolted out of the apartment. Surprisingly, I caught up with Susan quickly. She was walking slowly, her eyes swollen from crying. I stepped in front of her and took her hand. I squeezed her slightly cold hand warmly before I spoke. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'd regret it if I let things slide yesterday, but that was just an excuse. The truth is, I've always loved you, and I still do. I was just being a coward yesterday. I was scared. I hurt you once, and I wondered if I could make you happy again. I also thought I could never compare to your late husband. I kept questioning whether I had the right to ask to be by your side. I was scared, so I didn't say anything." I remembered the shaky handwriting on Susan's note, realizing she must have written it while crying, and my chest tightened. That's why I ran after her. "Susan, you said our reunion in high school was destiny. I feel the same way. I think our reunion here, as adults, is destiny too. I won't hurt you anymore. I'll cherish you in my own way, without comparing myself to anyone else. So I want to be with you. Please give me another chance. Will you date me?" After finishing my confession, I felt a bit embarrassed. I mean, a guy over 30 talking about destiny, it sounded so cliché. But Susan chuckled and said, "Sometimes you can be such a romantic, Jack. But I love that about you." We smiled at each other, and our eyes met. "Do you want to go back to my place again? I'll make you a delicious cup of coffee. Of course, I'll make yours a latte. Let's talk about the past and the future." "That sounds good," Susan said. "I have a lot of things I want to talk about too." We walked hand in hand back to my place. Since then, Susan and I have been dating smoothly, and tomorrow, after about a year, we're getting married. Today, we visited the grave of Susan's late husband. This isn't the first time I've come here with Susan. Before I confessed my feelings to her, I was pessimistic about whether I could make her as happy as her late husband did. But I realize it's not about comparing. I accept that her husband cherished Susan, and I decided to cherish her in my own way. That's why I visited his grave. I wanted him to rest easy, knowing I would protect Susan's smile. When Susan asked what I was thinking about while paying my respects, I kept it a secret. It's a conversation between men, I said with a grin, one I can't tell you. Susan pouted playfully. I'm curious, she said, but she seemed happy. After visiting the grave, we returned to our new home, the one we'll share together. As I was about to make coffee, Susan mentioned she preferred juice. She doesn't usually make requests like that. So I was worried and asked if she was feeling unwell. Seeing my concern, Susan grinned, then placed a hand on her stomach. I'll have to pass on the latte for a while. The caffeine might startle this little one. Realizing what she meant, I couldn't help but shout for joy. I held Susan in my arms. Our baby is due in 7 months. I can't wait for this new chapter of our lives to begin. So how did you like our story? Your subscription to our channel greatly motivates us to create more content.